welcome to another episode of the Ruiz podcast. Solo today. Today we're going to go over my thoughts on the finalized ACFT and kind of go over like why and how the Army came up with this finalized version. So first, if you don't know, the ACFT is the Army Combat Fitness Test. It began, I think, 2013-ish. Essentially, it was developed to test a more closely measuring, or like a test to measure more closely to combat readiness as opposed to like just general fitness, right? So that's how it began. And then did tests over the years. Some of the events are essentially based off the Army warrior tasking drills and feedback from soldiers who were coming back from deployment, essentially. And they created these events that were more closely related to movements that you would do in combat. So it's new events, tried a new grading scale, did all these things, and then finally in 2022, the Secretary of the Army approved the finalized version. So just to go through the history of it real quick, some of the things that I'll be using. It's a website that's linked in the description. And then also this as well. I don't know if this is anywhere public or not, but it's the chain teach. All right, so the evolution of the ACFT. So first, the objectives, it says to improve soldier readiness, transform culture, reduce injuries, enhance toughness, stamina, increase unit readiness. So ACFT 1, like the very first thing that got put out in fiscal year 19. Occupational standards based on warrior task battle drills. So what that means is the events were like that, but also it was gender neutral standards and by MOS category. So at that time, it was like if you were in a heavy MOS, like a combat arms, like infantry or something, you would have to your minimum standards were higher than somewhere on a lower category, and there was like 3 categories, right? So it was approved as a combat focused test with gender neutral standards by MOS category. So a year later, the ACFT 2.0 came out. The MOS standards were removed, so they removed the your minimum standards based on your MOS. I actually like that. I think that was actually a good idea. We'll see like why they removed it in the first place, but that was good. And then also at this time, this is when they came up with the alternate events. So they added the plank and as an alternate core event. All right. So then now ACFT 3.0, the test remains gender and age neutral. It's gender specific tiers for personnel actions. So that was the thing where for promotions and stuff, you had to get a final, what do you call it? You had minimum standards based on your gender of how many points you would get for promotions. All right, so now we're at the finalized version. And what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna go with the events. So the finalized version of the ACFT is 6 event, and it's general fitness assessment. Now it's not about combat readiness. However, minus 1 event, it's all the still same event. So I don't know why. So with performance norm standards based on gender and age, so it's back to like how the APFT was. Your minimum standard was based off your gender and then your age. So the 6 events is the 3 repetition max deadlift, the standing power throw, hand release push up with the arm extension, so T push ups essentially, and then the sprint drag carry. The plank is now in place of the leg tuck. And then you still have a 2-mile run. All right, so I'm gonna go over this entire memo. I'll do it from my laptop actually. So it's the Army Directive, and that explains. That's like the most in detail over it, what it explains the events and what's going to happen and all that good stuff. So again, you can find this on the links in the description. So the purpose of this memo is to establish the effective dates of full implementation of the ACFT, and then who's the applicable to, which is active duty, National Guard, and reserves. All right, so starting April 1st, which was like a couple weeks ago, the ACFT is a performance norm by gender and age groups. The test comprises of 6 events that we already know of. So for profiles and alternate events, so soldiers will take all events not prohibited by a permanent profile. If a permanent profile forfeits the 2-mile run, permanent profile directed alternate aerobic events include the row, stationary bike, the swim, and walk. So those are your alternate events for the ACFT. And then soldiers on temporary profiles will not take the ACFT, but will recover and recondition prior to taking the ACFT. All right, so scoring. To pass the ACFT, soldiers must attain at least 60 points in each test event taken and a go on the alternate aerobic events. So if you don't get a minimum of 60 points on any event, it's a no-go. It's a failure, and a failure of one or more events results in a total ACFT failure. All right, so we'll get like to the actual standards for each age group and gender later. All right, so diagnostic ACFTs. Right now, the only thing that we can do in the Army is diagnostic ACFTs. So diagnosis means basically just a practice one. If it's for record, that means it is actually on a PT card and it actually gets uploaded into DTMS and is put on record. So in any instance where a soldier passes the diagnostic ACFT prior to 1 October of this year, when it's required to be for record, the soldier may elect to have that test recharacterized as a record ACFT and uploaded into DTMS anytime after 1 October. So for the reserve component, we don't have to be for record until 2024. That's crazy. October 1st is when the regular Army, like active duty and then like AGR, that's when they can like start doing for record tests. But April 1st, 2023, by that time you have to have a for record ACFT uploaded into DMS. That's like no later than date to have a for record test completed. So for the reserve component that that aren't AGRs, like National Guard reserves, have to have a for record before April 1st, 2024. So it's like 2 years from now. All right, so continue on with the memo. If you fail, the ACFT is just like regular. You're going to be flagged for it. There's no change to that. So when you do fail for the regular Army, you have to retest no less than 120 days and no more than 180 days from the test failure. And then for the reserve component, if you fail, you have to retest in no later than 180 days and no more than 240 days from the test failure. So then continuing on, it's just like regular when you're coming into a new unit, whether you're direct commissioning or initial military training, you'll have to pass an ACFT. And then if you want to go to a school, like a professional military education, it's a PME. So like you're enlisted, BLC, ALC, SLC, things of that nature. If you're an officer, BOLIC, MCCC, or just CCC. And then effective of April 1st, 2023, a passing ACFT score is required for contracting senior ROTC cadets. So I guess if only you're a senior, I guess. All right, then continuing on for evals, a certain date. If your eval is due of a through day of October 22. You got to add the ACFT on there now. For the regular Army. For observer component, it's April of 2023. And then same for promotions. All right, so let's get into the grading scales of this. So again, it's gender and age. Now it's not a neutral scoring scale, so I believe it's the same age grouping: 17 to 21, and then 22 to 26, then 27 to 31, 32 to 36, 37 to 41, 42 to 46, 47 to 51, 52 to 56, 57 to 61, and 62 plus. So we'll go over the standards for my age. So I'm 30. So I'm in the 27 to 31 group, which is usually the most prime fitness group that we determined, right? So for the max deadlifts, as a male, the minimum I have to do is 140, and then the max is 340. And then for a female, it's the minimum is 120 and the max is 230. All right, so for the standing power throw, minimum I have to throw 6.5 meters and maximum 13.1 meters. So the hand release push-up, the minimum is only 10, and then the maximum is 62, which I think it was more. I think 62 is more than what it was before. I want to say the max was 60. And hand release, to do 60 hand release push-ups, that's pretty difficult. You gotta go pretty fast. So the sprint drag carry, minimum 232, maximum 130. That's pretty doable if you like really try. And then the plank, minimum 120, maximum 330. So let's talk about the plank for a minute. So before the plank, it was the leg tuck. The minimum for the leg tuck was only 1 rep, and people couldn't do 1 rep. So they changed it to a plank. And now we gotta do 1:25 of planks. That's a long time. A minute by itself is a long time. Now you gotta add 25 seconds just to get the minimum. And then 335, like, I'm not gonna say I'll never max it. If I actually try and like really train for it, sure. But that is very difficult. 3 minutes and 35 seconds of a plank is very difficult. I think the longest I've gone was about that time. And that was just for a competition. So I'll read like what the studies say about the leg tuck, but I'm gonna be honest with you. You couldn't just do 1 leg tuck. I'm not saying it's easy, but all you had to do was 1, and you had years to train just to do 1. All you needed was 1. But now we're gonna be dying in a plank. All right, so last thing, still 2-mile run. The max for me 22 minutes, and then the minimum for me 13:31. So that's good. Beforehand, the max for me, well, for a long time it was 13 minutes, but I think once I got into the age group I am in now, it was like 13:10 or something like that. So 13:27 doesn't seem too bad. I still like I feel like a mile run would be better at like a little faster pace. I think that will give us a little bit more general fitness measurement as opposed to a 2-mile run, especially with all the things that we're doing too. All right, so I'm gonna read this of why they chose the plank over the leg tuck. So they had a study, so the RAND observed that the leg tuck was not an accurate predictor of core strength for all soldiers. The leg tuck requires a minimum prerequisite upper body strength that made it impossible to measure core strength in all soldiers. So I wouldn't say impossible. It's definitely very possible to measure core strength in all soldiers with the leg tuck. In response, the Army will now use the plank as the sole exercise to assess core strength. So the only thing that I agree with now is that though we're calling it the Army Combat Fitness Test, they've changed it to where it's supposed to be only about your general fitness as opposed to actually being combat ready. So having a plank in that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is, one, calling it an Army Combat Fitness Test and then using the same other events that you've been using when you were trying to test combat readiness, right? So that's where the confusion comes into play. It's like, is this a general fitness? Because if it's just general fitness, then push-ups and sit-ups and a 2-mile run is actually fine. But if it was supposed to be what it was supposed to be for, combat readiness, like, this test is fine. But now we're not calling it combat readiness, it's just general fitness. So another thing, like with the leg tuck specifically for National Guard units, I have in my vault, I think like 6 to 10 pull-up bars that the Army gave to us to have so we can do the leg tuck. Now they're just there. Like, you just wasted your money now on sending us that. And now it's just sitting in our vault. And I'm not sure if like we can just sell it or people can just take it or whatever. Or if they're gonna come back and come and get it, but that's a waste of space in my vault. So you can see the different muscle groups being used, but both show that the plank is actually using more, well, they're actually using the same amount of muscle groups. So it's kind of weird the way they word it and then having the picture to follow up with it. So now we'll go on the website and go to the facts, the frequently asked questions, kind of give us like a answer to some of the things that we have. So first we'll go with the general. So why the change to an age and gender performance normed scoring scale? So the shift to an age and gender performance norming scale was based on a thorough analysis of all data, soldier feedback, and analysis from the RAND independent study. The adjustment in scoring scales more accurately reflects a distribution of performance across all elements of the Army and ensure a fair transition to a new fitness test of record. The resulting ACFT scoring scales are still rigorous and will enable the Army to promote a culture of physical fitness and readiness. All right, so I'm going to tell you that the scoring scales are still not rigorous. They are not that bad at all. And because you are now making it back to gender and age, it makes it even easier for the soldier, honestly. So, but as a general fitness test, sure, I get it. Which is why this shift is kind of okay. If we were still talking about the ACFT as being combat readiness, then yes, I would have an issue with this. Because obviously combat doesn't care about your age or gender. Alright, so why did the Army decide to remove the leg tuck? So it's based on the analysis and observed data, the Army determined that the plank simply provides a more accurate measure of core strength. And that is the basic answer right there. So this is a good one. Why does a non-combat MOS need to take a combat fitness test? So physical fitness is an important component of individual and unit readiness. We must make sure that all soldiers, regardless of MOS, are physically and mentally prepared to deploy, fight, win, and return home. The ACFT provides the Army an assessment of soldiers' muscular strength, muscle endurance, power, speed, agility, coordination, flexibility, balance, reaction time, and aerobic capacity. We owe it to our soldiers to equip them with tools to succeed and maximize their physical fitness potential. So this is like another confusing question because the ACFT is supposed to be now just general fitness, but now you're also saying that we need to be prepared to deploy, fight, win, and return home, and the ACFT helps us do that. Where, so is it measuring combat readiness or not? Like, I'm confused. And then the frequently asked question as well, that's not a good question. Like, if you're in the Army, you know, just because you're not in a combat MOS, like if you were to deploy, there are certain places you may go where you're still going to experience combat, regardless of your MOS. All right, so another question, a good one here. Will commanders be able to set higher standards for combat units? So already with the APFT, commanders can say, hey, for this company, you have to score a minimum of like 270 or whatever, right? So will it be the same? So although commanders can't set physical standards for acceptance into or retention in a combat unit, commanders can encourage soldiers to maximize their physical potential, which is saying, hey, in this unit, you're gonna do this. All right, so here's another good one. Where can I find more information about ACFT grader and NCOIC/OIC training and validation? So all assignations and commands must self-sustain the ACFT grader and NCOIC OIC training requirements found in FM 7-22 and ATP 7-22.01. So every unit is doing that, even National Guard. We had our own internal training like years ago. I was a part of it, and then when I was in another company, I was part of the training to get other people validated as well. So anybody can attend that training. I think you need a master fitness trader to do the initial training, but then after that, all right, so that's basically the ACFT in a nutshell, the finalized version. Like the main thing people were caring about is the new events and the standards and the removal of the leg tuck. So my final thoughts is I feel like it's gonna change again at some point because they're continuously doing studies on it and getting data to make sure that we're still going in the right direction. So I can see changes coming from it once this does 100% go for a record. Whatever those results come by, I could still see some type of change for something. One thing I think should change is the 2-mile run. I like 1 mile should be good, even a mile and a half, but a 2-mile run. But also just in general, how we were talking about how this test has transitioned more into a general fitness test. I feel like a actual combat test should be a thing. One thing you can do with an actual combat test is actually be in the correct gear and then do a bunch of other movements or things that you're like. Some of these movements are trying to mimic what you're going to do in combat. I think in an actual combat test, you can do the things that you're actually going to do in combat. So be with your kit on, have your weapon, and moving and doing things. Maybe individual movement techniques, buddy team and team movements, doing things like that while kind of in a stressful environment, but kind of doing it in a way where you can actually test and measure a person's performance, like a person's physical performance while doing that, not just for training, that you already do. But yeah, those are my final thoughts on the ACFT. I overall like this better than the APFT because I've always said that the APFT is just but this is a little bit better overall fitness and what it was originally supposed to be, like kind of measuring combat readiness. So it still does that too, even though it's not deemed that. But yeah, so that was another episode of the Coach Ruiz podcast. You can, if you like the video, like it. I am also on a bunch of other platforms as well if you just want to listen, and also follow me on Instagram. Thank you.